Okay, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you all for coming. The purpose for this press conference is really pretty simple. This past week, the FBI released the 2015 UCR crime data. For me, that's moderately interesting at best. You'll recall at the end of 2015, we did a press conference. We talked about violent crime and what it looked like in 2015. So really, when the UCR data are announced 9 months later, is really an interesting history lesson at best. So what I wanted to do today is to give you an update on where we are with respect to violent crime here in the city of Pittsburgh thus far in 2016. It's not a complete picture, but I want to make sure that as we're trying to keep our citizens informed about crime and disorder in their neighborhoods, that they're getting timely information. Similarly, we, the police, are trying to improve the way we use data in real time. And so one of the things I want to do, rather than bore you with a lot of dry numbers, although I'll throw enough dry numbers at you to keep you happy, but more to the point, behind the numbers, I want to share with you the stories. Okay, so there are going to be several stories I'm going to share with you. A couple stories about how the data suggested crime trends and what we did in terms of responding to them. How our group violence protocols using the model of focused deterrence was effective in helping to mitigate problems we were experiencing on our north side in our Zone 1. We'll take a look at some historical hotspot issues or high crime areas in our Zone 5 in East Liberty and talk about how the combination of community engagement, community policing, and a commander who's astute enough to use data to direct how he deploys his resources was really able to clean up in a combination with a lot of partnership from community stakeholders and developers into a very safe area. And we'll also talk a little bit about some of the downtown violent crime, because one of the things that's also, of course, on people's minds right now are some of the higher profile incidents, but I want to provide some context for you about what it looks like to us, what we think the problems really are, and I'll have my zone commander who will be available to help provide some insights for you on some of the things that we're going to be doing. But whether we're talking about the group violence intervention model, whether we're talking about the community policing and engagement and using data, or we're talking about how we intend to respond to the emerging crime issues with youth disorder and crime in our central business district, there's one key element, and I'm hoping this will be the main takeaway. That's the fact that none of these things are solely responses that can be effective solely performed by the police. We have partners, we have help, whether it's members of the community or other service providers, others within the system. And so every one of these are going to be stories about how we collectively work together to deal with crime and disorder in our community. So first let me just share with you the numbers. One of the first things people always want to talk about is how do we, Pittsburgh, stack up against other major cities? Now, this is 2015 data. We don't have the completed year data yet for other municipalities, so you've likely seen this before. This report will also be available to you. It's available on our website, so you can go and pull this up at any time you want to take a look at it. And Sonia and Emily will also have electronic copies that we will send to you when this press conference is completed. But in a nutshell, what you see there is Pittsburgh falls in the lower third in terms of violence per capita. And so when we're looking at homicides in other major cities, you get a sense for where we fall, all right, in terms of violence as measured by our population levels. So that kind of gives you a sense of context on our comparables. Here's a sense of comparing ourselves with ourselves over the course of time, and you see a few key things. Now, as you look at the homicides, let's look at the upper right-hand corner. You're going to see that at the end of August, we had 43 homicides to date, which put us a little bit below, fractionally below our high year of 2014. Now, remember, 2014 was a high for us. 2015 was an extremely good year. Those numbers came down low. And so we're looking at an approximate 30 or so percent increase over last year, but still we're not that far away from our five-year average. One of the interesting things we talked about last year, if you look at the upper right-hand corner, is non-fatal shootings. Intuitively, you would think non-fatal shootings and fatal shootings would track up together and they track down together. And for some reason, and I wish that I could explain it, those two things don't always correlate together. So what you see this year is while 2016 year to date, we're down very significantly as compared to last year in our non-fatal shootings, even though our homicide rates are up. There's a lot of different theories about that. I wish that I could say I've got a ton of confidence in both of them. The thing we like to always emphasize is any non-fatal shooting is simply an error in marksmanship. Okay, people are shooting other people with the intent to kill them, so both of those numbers are serious. One of the other things we have to remember also, and I think we may have a slide here later to talk a little bit about it, approximately 80% of our homicides involve the use of a firearm. So there's a significant subproportion of our homicides that in fact don't involve firearms at all. So that could help explain some of the lack of correlation. Our aggravated assaults year to date as compared to previous years year to date are likewise down. It's an interesting fact that those things don't correlate with one another. And as you look over to the lower right-hand corner as well, you can see the calls for shots fired, both with and without ShotSpotter, and you see that the calls for shots fired almost correlate better with the homicide rate than those other two metrics. So it's an interesting phenomenon. I wish I could explain it to you, but I can't. One of the things that's important for us also to talk about is understand who are our victims and who are actors where known. In the first 8 months, here's the averages over a 6-year period, and you see that in 2010 through 2015, 83% of our homicide victims were African American. They were black. This year, that percentage has increased another 3. My recollection is that 2014, when I started here, I remember reading an Allegheny County Human Services study of violent crime where that percentage was more like 78 or 79%. So there's a disparate impact for crime in our community, and it's something that causes us very significant concern. Likewise, the numbers suggest that our actors, where known, are predominantly African American or black. And you likewise see that the 5-year average was about 81%, and now that number has jumped up to 90. We've talked about this in previous sessions, in previous press conferences. The predominant pattern in our homicides is retaliatory violence between young people. I'm going to move forward to see if I've got a slide to this effect. And here again, the demographic of victims and suspects, gender, vast majority of the actors are male, or the victims are male, and where known, the vast majority of the suspects are likewise male. And have I got age? Okay, good. And you've got a kind of a visibility of the demographics of our victims and our suspects. Taken in total, it's a really sad picture. Our predominant picture of victims are young black men. Our where known are actors, the predominant profile is similar. Another statistic that I don't have here, but I recall seeing in other studies compiled by Allegheny County Human Services, that more often than not, a substantial percentage of the time, the actor and the victim know one another. Okay, so this paints a picture that suggests that there are social issues to which we need to address. This profile of the victim and the actor and the retaliatory nature of violence indicates one research-based best practice in policing, and that's our model of group violence intervention. And in the past, we've talked a little bit about group violence, or GVI, once affectionately or not known as PERC here. The reality is there is a best practice there for dealing with these types of behaviors. And I'm going to share some examples of how we've been moving forward towards implementing that, because that is a best practice that has been shown to work in community after community. We're often asked about our clearance rates, and there you see a graphic that illustrates something of an improvement in our clearance rates. Not as much as I would like. Okay, obviously I would like to have 100% clearance rates. One of the challenges we have in terms of, the ability to measuring clearance rates is easy. Different types of homicides are easier. Some are easier to solve than others, and those where both actor and victim know one another, particularly when they commonly are involved on the fringes or actively involved in the criminal lifestyle, are exceedingly difficult to prove. Very, very frequently, victims and their associates have no interest in working with us, so those can become particularly challenging. And if you're interested, we'd be happy to answer some questions about some of the things we've done to try to improve clearance rates. Again, I've already mentioned this. Over 80% of the time, firearms are the mechanism or the weapon used in our homicides. This graphic probably looks fairly familiar at this point. Every time we show density maps illustrating the locations of violent crimes or shots fired, we'll commonly see these same high stress, high poverty, comparatively high crime areas. The sad truth of the matter is that these are also some of our communities of color as well. So as you think about the victim and the actors, you can start to understand context matters a lot in terms of who are likely to fall victim to these types of crime. Now, I already kind of teed it up a little bit and talked about in zone 1. I'll prime the pump a little bit, and then I'll turn over to Commander Levani Bickerstaff, who's my major crimes commander, and for most of 2016, she was my Zone 1 commander. Early in the year and seemingly escalating through the year, we had a pattern of retaliatory violence between young people in the community. Commander Bickerstaff, her zone staff, working very closely with our major crimes and group violence intervention detectives, was engaged in a lot of really good proactive work during the course of the year. So I'm going to ask Commander Bickerstaff to come up, kind of describe for you what that response looked like, and then we'll talk about what that graph there on the right means.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Primarily what we did over at Zone 1 was we actually developed listings of everybody who was actually feeling the violence, everybody that was actively violent, anybody that was participating in any type of retaliation. And after we determined who those individuals were, we used every arm of the law that we could, probation, parole, anything that we can think of, any little violation, actually to move those individuals off the street. We, in fine view areas where we had a lot of the retaliation that went on throughout the course of the early spring, late spring, into early summer. And when we determined who those individuals are, we had no contact. We had a lot of help from the Housing Authority. They had different listings of individuals that were not allowed on the property because they had committed crimes. And one of the resounding things that we learned was the majority of those individuals did not even live up in the fine view area. And so we were able to actually develop the listing of the individuals that were not allowed on the property because of crimes they had committed, and we were able to enforce laws that Housing Authority has, like defiant trespass and criminal trespass laws. The other thing that we participated in wholeheartedly is when we would actually arrest some of those individuals, we went to arraignment watches, or we would call the arraignment judge and make them aware of all of the issues that these individuals that we have arrested as causing for us, so that we could make sure that they would revisit their bond and make sure that their bond was strong enough to keep them particularly locked up, so that we would have a little bit of a time where we could develop cases on these individuals. So primarily that's what we did. We did the arraignment watch, we did we identified who those individuals were, and we actually actively went after them. After a while, we also reached out to the violence response team. We created a violence response team in, I think it was in early July, and that response team from the Investigations Bureau, we actually systematically developed a response for each individual that was causing violence in the Zone 1 area. And that eventually did calm that area down, if you can look at the map over there from the month of July.
Thank you, thank you, Commander. So what you're looking at, of course, on the right is a violent crime density map showing the locations of the most violent crimes. The blue dots you see are enforcement efforts tied to that violence response plan. Now, one of the important things you heard the Commander describe is the fact that we weren't focused on geography, because the actors involved in the violence weren't from the particular neighborhood. So we worked very closely with the community, worked very closely with the partners. We had good support from a lot in the community letting us know who all was involved. And so we were very, very targeted in our enforcement efforts, focusing our attention on those who were really driving the violence and avoiding causing some of that collateral damage you can cause in neighborhoods when police come in with the mistaken belief they can calm down problems in fine view when the people who are driving the violence don't even live there. So that's one important thing you heard. And the other thing you heard her mentioning is working very closely with the courts to make sure they understand, the significance of arrests that are being made. One thing, another component of the group violence model that you've probably heard about, there will be legislation coming before council for approval, is for outreach, because a key component of the group violence intervention model is preventative outreach. And so the role for our outreach people and our group violence intervention detectives is, when one of these violent crimes occurs, is to go out and make contact with the family of the victim, go out to the associates of the group in conflict, and try to let them know that, and our message is really simple. We care about you, we love you, we don't want to see you fall victim to violence, but if this escalation continues, we fear for your safety. And the purpose for the outreach is to identify those most at risk and help divert them to services. So there's a service component and there is an outreach component. The outreach help us go out and try to help and make connections with people who we, the police, can't make connections with because they don't want to talk to us. And the other critical component here is the service component. And so often people will ask me, well, was service money wasted in the old perk? Well, no, not really. The critical thing that had to happen was the kind of focused enforcement you're hearing about right now, the outreach to the players and their families, and now the other key piece where the services come in is when we outreach to these young people, we have to give them an option besides engagement in the criminal lifestyle as a way to live, give them opportunities to make better choices. Our partners from Allegheny County Human Services have agreed to take up that role for us, so they will be our service providers, so we won't be asking the city to help fund that component of it. So there's a strong city-county partnership as well. So what the map you see on the right-hand side, green, the deeper color green simply reflects a dramatic decrease in violent crime subsequent to the July violence intervention response. A red means an increase. And so while you see the dispersed enforcement throughout the north side, what you see is a huge swath of area completely untouched, at least seemingly, by those arrests that benefited from the intervention that had occurred there. So that's how the group violence intervention model works, and how, as we see trends emerging, we shift our strategies to be responsive to them. Now, I'll come back to that. I was hoping that I had a slide for Zone 5. I don't, but one of the things I wanted to do is I'm going to invite up Commander Jason Lando. One of the areas that historically, if you think about the history of Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh's East Side, it's pretty well established that the East Liberty area is an area of high concentration of violent crime. As recently as the last couple of years, it's been well known to me as an area for robberies, drug activities, and those kinds of things. And so Commander Lando has been particularly skilled at looking at data and deploying his officers and then making sure they're engaged. I'm just going to invite Commander Lando up to just talk a little bit about his efforts.
Good afternoon. One of the things that we wanted to make sure we were doing in Zone 5 is we really wanted to go where the crime was. So what we did is on a weekly basis, we analyze the data, we look at all the police reports, and we find out where are our hot spots. And again, like the chief said, the hot spots are the areas where we're seeing the most crime that particular week. And sometimes based on the crime trends, they can change week to week. So we just adapt to that, and every week we change the 10 hottest spots in our zone. And that's where we send all the officers. Whenever they're not actively on calls, they're taking their calls from those hot spots to help deter criminal activity. One of the things that we did see through working with various community groups and residents is that two areas in particular were giving us probably the most problems on a day-to-day basis and a week-to-week basis. And that would be the East Liberty Business District, particularly the area around Broad and North Highland, and also the Homewood Business District, particularly that stretch along Frankstown Avenue. So what we did in response to that was we have two-person foot patrols, or beats as they're commonly known, and we have them out there at staggered days and times to address those issues. And what we've seen is a dramatic decrease in the East Liberty Business District to the point where we actually have very few, if any, complaints in that corridor anymore. And if any of you drive through there, you'll see that the loitering and the drugs and the open air drinking is virtually just completely gone. The businesses have called us to say that previously they would go to open for business in the morning, and there would be people at their doorstep, smoking marijuana or drinking, and now you drive through there and there isn't anybody. So I know the businesses have been very appreciative of the outreach. Likewise, in Homewood, we have similar foot patrols out there, and the businesses have reported that there's been a decrease in the amount of people that are loafing and loitering out there. And again, just for the citizens that live and work in that area, it's a perception thing. They want to feel safe, and when there's people just hanging out on the corners all day and all night, it creates this feeling that it's not a safe area. So that's why we have the foot patrols out there to help bring those issues down. The other thing I want to mention is recently in Zone 5, we started partnering with a group called the Mad Dads, and they've been exceptional in working with us. The Mad Dads is an organization. It's a faith-based organization, and they go out and they will do what they call street patrols at night. They help supplement us. So we talk to them regularly. We tell them where our hotspots are and when we're going to be out there on patrol. And then when the times where we can't have our foot beats out there, when the officers are off, they'll help supplement us with their street patrols. And the one kind of added bonus that they have, as the chief alluded to earlier, is that sometimes there are people that just aren't comfortable talking to the police. And these are men that have grown up in these communities. They've taken a particular interest in cleaning up the streets, and part of their street patrols is also mentoring the youth and helping them see that there is a better way out of the situation that they're in. So they've been a huge help to us. Some of the other things we've done to engage the community is we put out a weekly community crime blast, and any resident or business owner in Zone 5 can subscribe to be on that blast. It comes out every Monday, and it's just a way of us keeping the community informed about what's going on in their neighborhoods. It probably goes out to several thousand people every Monday afternoon, And that's really been a big help, because the community responds back to those emails and they tell us what's going on their street, suspicious cars that they've seen, suspicious people that they think don't belong there. And then we can then route those emails to the appropriate detectives or community outreach officers to follow up on that. So that's something really important that helps us keep engaged with the community, and it really allows us to work in partnership with them. So those are just a few of the things that we've done recently to help.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
And one of the important things you heard Commander Lando talk about is oftentimes you hear, well, never mind this, this community stuff. What about tough on crime? How are we going to, aren't you out there arresting bad guys? The reality is that the guardian presence of police in partnership with good community partners like Mad Dads, like the business owners, has been well shown in research to have a significant effect in the prevention of crime without displacement. And so if one look, Professor Dan Nagin won the Stockholm Prize for his work in this area, looking at the deterrent effect, and it's very well documented. And so I wanted to make sure to share that anecdote so that you understand that community policing is crime prevention, and that by officers being out there, being engaged, talking to people, and working in partnership with others, it reduces crime. So it's not simply a feel-good strategy to make people like us while we're out there doing enforcement. It's quite the opposite. Our goal is crime prevention. And where all else fails, certainly we'll use the tool of arrest, but I'm very proud of the way the work that Zone 5 has done in that area has proven Professor Nagin's point. Now, much has been said in the last couple months about downtown violence and downtown youth disorder and what's going on. Our crime analysts pulled up some really basic numbers that just will jump off at you if you look at the right-hand column on the left-hand chart there in terms of the percentage of change. And you see things started out pretty good in the year, actually down quite a bit most of the year, and then July and then August, things popped off. Now, what's going on in the Central Business District in that period of time? That is peak event season. That is where we have hundreds of thousands of people beyond those who happen to live in the Central Business District frequenting that area. And so certainly it's not to be surprised that that would occur, and it's important that we be agile in our response. And so some of the things that made it into the public consciousness, if you will, was some of the youth disorders surrounding our events. Okay, so what did you see us do? Well, you saw us adapt our tactics. We developed and brought to bear a specially trained crowd control team. We used different tactics to post to key locations where the kids like to hang out rather than simply chasing them around the zone. You saw us posting high intensity lights in the dark places where the kids usually like to hang as a mechanism to try to take away their anonymity. There near the end, you didn't see, but it was there. We partnered with juvenile probation and had juvenile probation officers who know these kids out there with our officers. Again, as a mechanism, our goal is to take away their anonymity to cause themselves to behave. We partnered with Port Authority to have more buses brought to bear to try to be able to shuttle them out of town a little bit more quickly. Is it perfect yet? Not even close. Okay, not even close. There's all kinds of issues with unaccompanied young people converging on the Central Business District, and so there's a lot of things we're working on to enhance that partnership, and we could talk a little bit more about that as we go on. But we did a lot to try to respond. A similar but not identical issue that's been very much in the public mind is the disorder around the T station, particularly in Liberty and Wood, surrounding school let out. And so there's a lot of things happening in that particular area as well. My commander is working very, very closely with Pittsburgh Public Schools, with the charter schools that are down there. We've got some great support and partnership from our United States Attorney, who's been a very influential convener to bring non-conventional partners to the table to help us as well. And so we've had a number of working group meetings, as we call it, where members from all of the key stakeholder organizations, the ones I mentioned, as well as Port Authority Police, School Police, Allegheny County Police, the Sheriff's Department, we all convene down there, take a look at the problem, and say what better can we do about it. We've had outreach from non-conventional partners, like those who are involved in some of the coaching of sports, the Mad Dads is another group. So those who don't commonly partner, and our goal is to try to get representatives of people who know the kids down there in these areas with us, so that we turn what is in danger of becoming a police problem and turn it into an intervention where we can help the kids to make better decisions. On the October 11th, there will be a large meeting in this room with all of the key stakeholders, because we're going to explore this problem in greater depth. What we're trying to do is take a community-wide problem-oriented impact and say, what's causing all of these children to converge at the same place at the same time twice a day, every day during their school year? And we're going to bring us all together, and we're going to talk about what those different variables are. And if each of us from within our own place in the system are able to own and fix our pieces of it, I think we can fix and address some of these issues without simply turning them into a contest to see how many young people Pittsburgh police can arrest. So that's our intended plan moving forward. One thing I want to emphasize real quick before I open up for questions, we're working very, very diligently with both our in-house crime analysis unit, who I'm very grateful for their work, and also with our friends from Allegheny County Human Services, who do just amazing work with analytics. So I'd like you to make note of those two links down there, because we provide them data, we work with them, they publish amazing reports that provide insights into the crimes that are occurring and the story behind them. And they also feature interactive visualizations like the one you see up there. So one can go in and select what year they want to look at, or what months, what neighborhood you want to look at, and it will automatically sort and show you a profile of what that crime looks like within those parameters. Another example is likewise, again, this is interactive, and one can query on a number of the different dimensions here. So we're looking to enhance our own internal capacity, but we're not waiting long to get this information available to you as members of the media or to the public. So this is there, it's available, it's right now. We're working on getting to where they're automatically updated on a daily or weekly basis. So if not today, within the next few weeks, these will be regularly updated. My understanding is that if we're not active now, we will be within the next week or so. So this is available to you right now. So if you're wondering, hey, what's the story? By all means, go take a look. And then the question for us can be, rather than, hey, what are the numbers? You can call and say, hey, we're looking at your numbers. What does it mean? And I think that's a more interesting conversation for both of us. So that wraps up my formal comments. And I'm sorry, here's just another example of another one of the interactive analytic tools that's out there. So that ends my formal comments. Do you have any questions for me or any of my?